She said she needed someone with ambition. I thought she meant dreams. Turns out, she meant a bigger house, a shinier car, and friends with private jets. She left me the day after my promotion. Not because I failed, but because my success wasn't loud enough. She wanted status. I wanted peace. So while she posed for Instagram with her new somebody, I disappeared. And I built. Quietly. The last thing she said before walking out was, "You'll thank me one day." I didn't. Not for a long time. When I met Elise, we were both nobodies working 2 jobs to keep the lights on. She worked nights at a restaurant downtown. I juggled sales calls and freelance work just to stay afloat. But we had love. At least I did. She was stunning. The kind of beauty that silenced rooms. But it wasn't her looks that hooked me. It was the way she made chaos feel like a lullaby. That warmth, that presence, until it turned cold. It started with little things. Comments about my car, how I dressed, who I knew. I thought it was her pushing me to grow. I didn't realize she was measuring me against someone else. One night, I came home to find our apartment spotless, candles lit, and Elise in a red dress she hadn't worn in years. I thought it was for me. It wasn't. That night, she told me she'd met someone. Someone who owned half the buildings I walked past every day. "He can take me places," she said. "Real places. You're safe. But I want more." I didn't scream, didn't beg, just nodded. And in silence, I watched her walk away from the life we built, chasing a version of life someone else sold her. What she didn't know was, sometimes the quiet ones build the loudest empires. For the first few weeks, I barely ate. Not out of heartbreak, but clarity. When someone leaves you not because you failed, but because you weren't flashy enough, it forces you to redefine what success even means. So I moved out of that city, out of that version of me. I relocated to a small town where no one knew my name, rented a 1-bedroom apartment above a bookstore, and got to work. I cut out the noise. I deleted every app that screamed for validation. I stopped performing for a crowd that never clapped for me. I took a job at a local logistics firm, entry level. No one cared where I came from. But that meant no one limited where I could go either. Every evening, I stayed late to learn. Operations, systems, bottlenecks. I asked the janitor about shipping flows. I shadowed the drivers. I read contracts in my free time and took online courses at night. By year 2, I'd automated a broken system and saved the company nearly $500,000. The CEO noticed. Not just the results, but how I never asked for credit. He pulled me into strategy meetings, gave me a team, then a department. Meanwhile, Elise had become an accessory in someone else's lifestyle. Photos of beach resorts and rooftop dinners filled her social media. But when I looked closely, I noticed the cracks. She never posted with him, only the scenery. Her smile was never quite real. And beneath the filters, I could still see the girl who once believed in late-night ramen and dreams stitched together with duct tape. I didn't reach out, not because I hated her, but because I was finally building something that didn't depend on anyone's approval. By year 4, I was CO. We expanded, acquired, partnered with a chain of international distributors. I bought my first suit off the rack, then a custom one, then a closet full. But I never forgot the silence. The nights no one clapped, the meals alone, the voice that told me, "You'll thank me one day." She was right. I did thank her, just not out loud. And she had no idea what was coming next. One morning, I walked into a boardroom filled with strangers and suits sharper than my best tie. We were preparing to close a partnership with a European tech giant, and I was leading the negotiation. At the head of the table sat a man I hadn't seen in years, Richard Carlyle, Elise's boyfriend, or perhaps ex. He didn't recognize me at first. I had changed. My posture, my tone, my silence. But when I introduced myself, a flicker crossed his face. He covered it well. Too well. I presented our pitch, numbers clean, roadmap clear. He nodded politely, interjected occasionally. But I saw it, the twitch in his jaw, the nervous glance at his assistant, the forced chuckle. After the meeting, he approached me privately. "You're Elise's ex, right?" I smiled. "Was. A long time ago. She said you disappeared. Some stories are better told in silence." He tried to gauge if I was a threat. I wasn't. I was something worse, a memory he couldn't control. 2 weeks later, the deal was ours. He signed the contract. I signed his downfall. Because in that deal, we didn't just gain access to his logistics tech. We gained voting rights, influence. It wasn't personal. It was power, earned, not taken. But fate? Fate has a cruel sense of theater. That same month, Elise reached out. An email, just one line. "Was it always in you?" I didn't reply. Not because I had nothing to say, but because I had everything to lose by saying it. She showed up at one of our product launches weeks later, alone, in a dress that used to mean celebration, but now looked like apology. She waited until the event ended, then stopped me by the elevator. "You look like someone I used to dream about." I looked at her, really looked, and realized something chilling. She wasn't the same person who left me for glamour. She was the person who stayed with someone who promised it, then failed to deliver. "I hope you find what you're looking for," I said. She stepped forward. What if it was never about finding, but returning? I didn't flinch. I didn't smile. I simply pressed the elevator button and let the doors close between us. Some goodbyes don't need words. They just need silence dressed in power. After that night, I expected peace. The quiet kind that comes when old ghosts stop knocking. But ghosts have long memories. A month later, I received an invitation to a private gala hosted by one of our newly acquired subsidiaries. Formal, black tie with the usual guest list of business elites and media darlings. I almost didn't go. But something in me, not revenge, not pride, just closure, said I should. The ballroom glittered with chandeliers and champagne flutes. People moved like they were floating, like nothing in the world could touch them. And then she entered. Elise, again. Only this time, she wasn't alone. She walked in beside an older gentleman, distinguished, moneyed, but hollow behind the eyes. I'd seen that look before, in mirrors from my past life. They made their rounds, greeting guests with practiced charm. She didn't notice me at first, but when she did, everything changed. Her smile faltered. Her grip on his arm stiffened. I didn't wave, didn't nod. I just turned away. Later that night, she found me by the balcony, alone. "Why are you here?" she asked, voice quieter than I remembered. "Why are you?" I replied. "I thought maybe we could talk, just once, without the noise." I let the silence stretch. "Talk," I said. She looked up at me, eyes brimming. "You became everything I ever wanted, and I became everything I used to hate." I didn't comfort her. I didn't lecture. I just asked, Why didn't you wait? She bit her lip, hesitated. Because I was scared you'd never become him. And now? She exhaled. Now I see. You always were. I just couldn't see past my own fear. There was nothing left to say. So I left. Walked back inside, shook hands, took photos, toasted deals, and never once looked back. The past isn't a place to revisit. It's a fuel source, one you burn slowly, until there's nothing left but light. It wasn't long before the media picked up the story. Not mine, hers. A leaked report revealed that her new partner, the older gentleman from the gala, was under investigation for embezzlement and fraud. Millions siphoned, investors betrayed, employees unpaid. She wasn't directly named, but her face was in every photo, every whisper, every caption that read, "Complicit or collateral?" I didn't gloat, because I knew that kind of collapse. I had lived through it once, only quieter. But the universe? It had a cruel symmetry. The same tabloids that once praised her for trading up now dragged her down with headlines like, "The trophy who tarnished." Then, one morning, a brown envelope slid under my office door. No stamp, no name. Inside, a single photograph. It was Elise, sitting alone on a park bench. No makeup, no mask. Just a woman who looked like she hadn't slept in weeks. On the back, a note in handwriting I'd never forget. "Do you believe in second chances?" I stared at it for a long time. Not with anger, not even pity. Just clarity. She hadn't sent it to ask for love. She sent it because I was the last person who remembered her before she became a cautionary tale. The last person who knew her when she was just Elise, not someone's +1, not a scandal. And maybe that's all she needed. Recognition. But I wasn't in the business of rescuing ghosts. I folded the photo, slid it into a drawer I never opened again, and walked into the boardroom where my team was waiting. Because empires don't pause for nostalgia. They rise on discipline and the ashes of what tried to stop them. Months passed. The empire grew. We expanded into tech, hospitality, and even green energy. My name, once erased from Elise's future, was now being whispered across industries as a man who turned pain into precision. But with success came shadows. One evening, during a conference in Chicago, I received a call from a blocked number. Against my usual habits, I answered. "Hello?" No reply at first. Just the faint hum of traffic. Then, "You always knew how to disappear." It was her, Elise. Her voice was thinner now, worn, but unmistakable. "What do you want?" I asked, keeping my tone neutral. "I wanted to say thank you." A pause. "For what?" "For not saving me. For letting me fall. I needed that." I didn't respond. She continued. "I'm in a program now. Getting help. Not for him. Not even for what I lost. But for who I became." I closed my eyes. "Good," I said quietly. "You don't have to believe me," she whispered. "But I needed you to hear it from me." I didn't tell her I believed her. I didn't offer comfort, but I didn't hang up either. We sat in silence for nearly a minute. Two voices on opposite ends of a line, connected only by memory. Then she spoke one last time. "I hope your empire brings you peace." And just like that, the line went dead. I stood by the hotel window, city lights flickering below like static in the night. She was a ghost I had learned to live without. But some ghosts don't haunt you. Some just want to be seen. One last time. The next 5 years were a blur of mergers, milestones, and silent victories. My face began appearing on magazine covers, not for scandals or who I was married to, but for what I'd built. The man who rose from betrayal and turned ashes into infrastructure. And yet, with every headline, I remained disciplined. No outbursts, no distractions, no Elise. Until one fall morning, I received an envelope. Legal size this time, with a firm's letterhead I didn't recognize. Inside, a handwritten letter. It wasn't from Elise, it was from her daughter. "My name is Mara," it began. "You don't know me, but you once loved the woman who gave birth to me." I sat down. I found journals, letters, pieces of a life my mother tried to forget, but never could. She died last spring, quietly and alone. The words were heavy, but not bitter. She told me about you in fragments, about how she left someone who saw her too clearly, and how she never forgave herself for trading truth for illusion. Mara's handwriting was delicate, like someone writing carefully so they wouldn't smudge grief. "I don't want anything from you. I just wanted to say thank you for seeing her before the world did, for being kind even when she wasn't." I read the letter twice, then again, then folded it gently and placed it beside the photo from years ago, both now sealed in a box marked lessons. Some stories don't end with a kiss or a reunion. Some end with a daughter picking up the pieces of a truth her mother couldn't carry. And sometimes, that's enough. I thought Mara's letter was the final echo. But fate, as it often does, had one last chord to play. Months later, at a charity gala for youth entrepreneurship, a cause close to my journey, I was asked to speak. I delivered my usual story: failure, betrayal, resilience. Afterward, I stayed behind, sipping club soda and scanning the room. That's when I saw her. Not Elise. Mara, older now, poised, eyes steady like someone who had learned to carry the weight of others' choices. She walked up slowly, clutching a worn, leather-bound notebook. "My mother's," she said, offering it. "I think it belongs with the man who helped her write it." I hesitated, then accepted. "I've read every word," Mara added. She was broken, but she was trying. I nodded. "We all are." She smiled faintly. "I never met the man she described, but I wanted to." "That man," I said, "was born from her absence." A pause hung between us. Then she extended a hand. "I'm starting something of my own, a fund to help girls who grew up in chaos." I thought, maybe you'd like to invest. Not money, belief. I looked at her, not as a ghost's daughter, but as someone forging her own story. "Yes," I said. "Let's build something better." We didn't hug. No tears. Just two people who knew that sometimes the most powerful empires are built on understanding, not vengeance. And maybe, just maybe, that's the real legacy. A year passed. Mara's foundation thrived, and I found myself more involved than I expected, not just funding, but mentoring, listening, watching a generation rise from fractured beginnings. One afternoon, I received a message. "Turn on Channel 5. I did. A live panel. 3 women discussing resilience, betrayal, and success after loss. Mara sat in the center. "We all come from broken places," she was saying. "But sometimes the people who survive aren't the ones who fight the hardest. They're the ones who were seen, who were believed in, and I had that." The camera zoomed slightly. She held up a photo. It was old, black and white. A grainy capture of Elise and me in our early 20s, standing outside a tiny apartment with nothing but dreams and a second-hand desk. He never needed the world to know he was right. Mara said. He just kept building, quietly. That's the kind of power I believe in. I turned off the TV and leaned back. No applause, no fanfare. Just something deeper. Legacy, I realized, isn't what you leave behind. It's who carries your silence with pride. And sometimes, the loudest victories are the ones that whisper your name only when the world stops listening. Years later, I was invited to speak at a global summit. Leaders born from loss. The irony wasn't lost on me. I stood behind a podium, staring at hundreds of faces lit by soft blue lights. Among them, Mara, front row, confident, poised, her foundation now international. I didn't read from notes. I spoke from scars. Sometimes, I said, the betrayal isn't what destroys us. It's what clears the rubble, so we finally see the foundation we forgot we had. There was silence, then slow applause. But after the event, as the crowd filtered out, a familiar face approached. Elise, gray at the temples, designer coat, eyes less cruel but tired. She didn't speak at first, just looked. I saw the broadcast, she said finally. Mara's interview. I nodded. She's remarkable. I didn't expect to feel what I felt. I stayed quiet. I was wrong, Elise said, about what mattered, about you. My heart didn't race. My hands didn't shake. The storm had passed long ago. You taught me something, she added. What's that? That a man can be silent and still change the world. I smiled. Took me a while to learn that myself. She extended her hand, not to ask for anything, just acknowledgement. I took it, briefly, then turned to leave. Some goodbyes don't need words. Some victories don't need an audience. Weeks after the summit, an unexpected package arrived at my office. No return label, just my name, scrawled in handwriting I didn't recognize. Inside was a book, leather-bound, old. I opened it. The first page was inscribed, "To the man who taught me that silence doesn't mean surrender." It was Elise's memoir. I sat in my chair, holding her words, her story. It wasn't an apology, not really. But it was something else. Something rarer. A reckoning. She wrote about our youth, about the hunger for success that clouded her vision, about the coldness she mistook for control, and about the moment she realized that what she'd left behind had become everything she'd been chasing. There were chapters about Mara, too, and about me. She never begged forgiveness. She didn't need to. Truth, laid bare, has its own kind of grace. I placed the book on my shelf, not as a trophy, not as a wound, as a reminder that sometimes, when people finally look back, they don't always want to return. They just want to be seen. And being seen, truly seen, can be the final gift we give to someone we once loved, even if they never earned it. On the day I retired, Mara threw me a small party. Just a few close friends, a modest venue, and no cameras. She handed me a glass of wine and whispered, "You know, if she could see you now." I smiled. She did. Mara raised an eyebrow. She watched the summit, read the articles, sent me a copy of her memoir. Mara didn't ask questions. She never had to. She simply squeezed my hand and said, "Closure looks good on you." Later that night, as the music faded and the guests trickled out, I stepped outside alone. The city stretched before me, lights glittering like promises I no longer needed to chase. My phone buzzed. It was a message from an unknown number. I watched you become what I never understood. I hope you're at peace. E. I didn't reply, not out of bitterness, not even pride. Just peace. Real peace doesn't need punctuation. It lingers in the quiet, where no applause echoes, no spotlight burns, where the only voice that matters is your own. And for the first time in decades, that voice wasn't asking to prove anything. It was simply whispering, "You made it." And I had. Not in spite of what she did, but because I refused to let it define me. Years passed. Mara and I moved to the countryside. Nothing fancy, just acres of quiet and skies that didn't compete with towers. I started writing, not memoirs, not legacy pieces, just small essays, reflections, stories I never had time to tell. Some nights, Mara would read them aloud by the fireplace. We'd laugh, sometimes cry, and sometimes she'd pause, look up from the page and say, "That part, that one, it's her, isn't it?" I'd nod. She never resented it, because she knew the difference between remembering and holding on. Then one morning, an envelope arrived. No stamp, no return address. Inside was a single Polaroid. It was Elise, older, simpler, standing in front of a modest bookshop, holding a cup of coffee and smiling, not for the camera, but for someone just behind it. On the back, a note. I found peace too. That was all. And it was enough. Because sometimes, stories don't need sequels. Just a final sentence that lets you close the book and exhale. Mine was this. I lost her chasing status, but I found myself building peace. And in the end, that was the only empire that ever mattered. One evening, Mara brought out an old wooden box I hadn't seen in years. It held fragments of a past life. Photographs from company launches, handwritten letters from investors, even the blueprint sketch of the first product I pitched at a diner table. At the bottom was a folded napkin. I knew it instantly. On it were Elise's original words. "You dream too loud for a man with so little." I stared at it for a long while. Then I grabbed a pen. Just beneath her line, I wrote. And yet, here we are. Mara smiled as she watched me place the napkin back and close the lid. "It doesn't hurt anymore?" she asked. I shook my head. No, it fuels. Because memory isn't always a wound. Sometimes it's a reminder of how far you've climbed with broken legs. That night, as we lit the fireplace and let silence settle between us, I realized something else. I had been waiting all these years for someone to apologize, to acknowledge, to regret. But peace didn't come from her. It came the moment I stopped needing it from anyone else. Because the loudest dreamers don't wait to be believed. They build anyway. Months later, I was invited to speak at a university business symposium, not because I was the richest man in the room, but because I had failed publicly and rebuilt privately. I stood in front of rows of students, their eyes wide, not with ambition, but with anxiety. The world was louder, faster, crueler than ever. And yet, I didn't tell them to hustle harder or grind more. I told them the truth, that your value doesn't vanish when someone walks away. That sometimes, the people who underestimate you are the very architects of your motivation. And that success isn't the empire you build, but the peace you live in once you no longer need to prove anything. One student, a quiet girl in the front row, raised her hand. "What happened to her?" she asked. I paused and smiled. "She got what she wanted," I said, "and I got what I needed." Because some stories end not with revenge or regret, but with clarity. And in that moment, under a warm spotlight, in front of minds not yet jaded, I knew I had become the man I was never allowed to be with her. And for once, that was more than enough. The final act came unexpectedly. At a gala honoring local entrepreneurs, I was presented with a humanitarian award. Not for profit margins or acquisitions, but for funding education programs in underserved communities. As I stood near the bar, accepting congratulations, I heard a voice I hadn't in years. Never thought I'd see your name on that plaque. I turned. Elise stood there, draped in luxury, yet somehow smaller than I remembered. Her eyes scanned the room like she was still measuring value. Neither did I replied calmly. She didn't smile. So, this is what success looks like now? I glanced across the room at Mara, who was laughing with a group of young scholars. No, I said. This is what peace looks like. There was a silence between us, one that didn't ache anymore. She opened her mouth to say something, but thought better of it. And just like that, she turned and walked away. No apology, no closure. And for the first time, I didn't need either. Because when you build an empire from ashes, you don't owe the fire anything. I left the gala early, not out of discomfort, but because I no longer needed to stay late proving myself to people who never cared. Back home, the house echoed with laughter. Mara and I danced barefoot in the kitchen, her favorite jazz vinyl spinning gently in the background. No fancy shoes, no audience, just two souls who found each other through the debris of past heartbreaks. Later that night, I sat by the window, a soft breeze brushing my face. The city lights shimmered below, no longer symbols of status, but of stories. Each window, a life. Each light, a survivor. I thought about the younger me, the one Elise left, the one who almost gave up, and I whispered to him in the quiet. She left because she couldn't see your worth. But that's okay, because one day you won't just be seen, you'll be remembered. I didn't need revenge. I didn't need her downfall. All I needed was this moment. And for the first time in years, I closed my eyes. Not from exhaustion, but from peace. Some scars never fully fade, but they stop bleeding the moment we stop scratching at them. She left me for status, and maybe that was the best thing she ever did for me. Because in losing what I thought I needed, I built something that could never be taken away. An empire not made of gold or glass, but of purpose, peace, and love that doesn't waver. To anyone listening, maybe your version of peace won't look like mine, but it's out there. And sometimes, the ones who break us unknowingly build us. If this story stirred something in you, share it. Leave a comment, or just sit with it for a while. Because maybe, just maybe, your empire is waiting. Thank you for listening.